I think you all know what the challenges the planet faces are. The world population is growing rapidly. It's going to reach as many as 9.7 billion people by mid-century. The needs of that additional population today are great, and they will significantly strain our resources. We will need to provide 50 to 70% more food to feed that additional population, which will create inherent conflicts in our water, in our land, and of course increase our greenhouse gas emissions. 80% of our fresh water currently goes to the agricultural sector. How are we going to supply additional water in a confined environment to that needed food supply while the world urbanizes and we need fresh water to sustain our natural systems? Meanwhile, even as our human needs grow, we will need to reduce our carbon emissions by as much as 80%, the reason you're all here today. We have to avoid the worst effects of climate change, and we need to fundamentally transform the energy sector. I think that's the exciting part, is actually fundamentally transforming the energy sector. Not only figuring out how to reduce, but figuring out how to create. We have to provide energy access to the 1 billion people in the world who now do not have energy, and we have to do it in a way that is affordable to the people at the bottom of the pyramid. We actually, I think, will have the technology and know-how to do this. The question is, will we have the will? And will we be able to align our policies, capital markets, investments, and determination to meet the challenges of the world? These challenges have been in the front of our world's leaders very much over the last year. All the leaders of the world came together in September in New York at the UN to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals. Later this month, they'll again gather in Paris and hopefully reach agreement on a strategy to address the very, very urgent challenge of climate change and create a pathway to keep us within the 2% Celsius change that they have agreed to earlier. Not only are these agreements from all the major nations, but I think the exciting thing is, and this conference is an example of it, there's such a groundswell of activity well beyond that. It's not just our world's leaders, it's companies, it's financial institutions, it's our cities, our regions, our states that are coming together. And so many leaders in each of these sectors are finding their own pathway, joining with others, making announcements. Of course, I'm always, when you make an announcement, there has to be a pathway to accountability too. We have to be sure that these announcements actually turn into something and are not just a way to join in the parade. Make no mistake, neither the SDG goals or the climate goals can be reached without a major commitment from the private sector. That's why you're here today to address these issues. Government resolve is essential. We have to have the policies to take us down the right track. But without money backing it up and directing it down sustainable pathways, we just are not able to achieve these goals, either individually or overall. I think one of the most riveting moments for me over the course of the last several months was the Pope coming to the United States. I'm not a Catholic, I'm not particularly religious, but I think he is an individual of such moral authority, really calling on the leaders of the world, going to the United States Congress, not a very receptive place on this particular issue of climate change, and reminding us what our responsibility is to the people of the world, that this is an issue that we share together. It's an issue that we need to join in with together to find the solutions. But progress is being made. Just this week, a report showed that climate action by the G20 that 11 major countries have a reduced number of emissions. Per capita emissions declined from 2007 to 2012 in Australia, the United States, Canada, Japan, Britain, the European Union, South Africa, Italy, France, and Mexico. Of course, this decline is also at the same time that the economy declined, so it's not necessarily the best news, but it still actually is important because chemistry matters, and the fact that the emissions are going down to the Earth's atmosphere is really significant. But the leading voices on climate change that are out there, people like James Hansen, Bill McKibben, will be the first to remind us all that these changes are not enough, that we have to come together in a much more significant and transformational way. All the commitments that have been made, all the dollars spent will not achieve that goal of keeping us within the 2-degree centigrade change that the world has agreed to. There's already been a 1-degree change, and the time is really running out. What will make the change that we seek? Civil society, government, business, all have a role to play. There's a growing chorus demanding change. The environmental community is growing broader and deeper and will create that voice for social action. I think that part of it, the environmental community, the community that I've been part of for so long, is a critical factor. It's the reminder, it's the activists, it's people on the front line. It's the 4-year campaign to stop the Keystone XL pipeline, which was achieved last week when President Obama finally turned that pipeline down. You might wonder, is a pipeline significant? It is, because it galvanized action. It raised attention. It was a feature of what a continuing fossil fuel addiction means to the world. And it just ignited a tremendous amount of action and resolve. So it had tremendous significance in building that voice that we need. The movement that's growing to keep it in the ground, not to develop our fossil fuels, is one that's going to grow in this country significantly over the next several months. I think particularly on the Democratic side, it's going to be a major feature of the equation. I don't think a Democratic candidate can actually run and get support, broad support from the environmental community without really addressing that. We've had a parallel pathway of let's have a climate strategy and let's continue being very aggressively developing fossil fuels in this country. That strategy does not work going into the long term. So it's coming into direct conflict, and you're going to see that as a major feature of social action. The divestment movement is growing. That's something you really are very familiar with, and I think it's exciting. I think, though, to remember that it's the divest, invest, and there's a lot of attention and action and engagement on the divest side. There needs to be an equivalent amount on the invest side, because we need to get out of the bad stuff, but we really need to accelerate and unleash the good stuff. Communities and activists across the country are really challenging every new energy initiative. We see that in the fracking controversies. Fracking is going on in 30 states. What's happened in this country is that energy development has landed in the front yards of people across the country. What was thought of as being in far off reaches of perhaps Alaska, in Prudhoe Bay, or in Texas, or in Oklahoma, or in Wyoming, suddenly it was potentially in New York. It's not. It's in Pennsylvania. It's in Ohio. It's in 30 states. So actually the upside for that, from my point of view, is it's really made people understand what our energy addiction is. So it's brought attention, and it's getting people to understand if that's not the pathway we want to go down, we have to choose another pathway. Because the reality is we all turn on our lights, we all drive our cars, we all are absolutely dependent on energy. But what kind of energy is it going to be? That's the challenge for the future. Increasingly, there's evidence in the regulatory sector that addressing climate is important. The SEC is looking at climate risk, and earlier it was mentioned these new rules that have come out that actually support investments in the sector and don't penalize the pensions for addressing these issues. The renewable sector is growing very, very fast. You all know that. It's actually coming into alignment with the fossil fuel sectors. It's the fastest, not only the fastest growing part of our energy sector, but it's creating lots and lots and lots of jobs. When we worked on energy legislation on climate in 2010, we used to talk about this is going to create green jobs. We actually had very little evidence. There wasn't that much going on, so it was more a hope than a reality. Now there is a lot of data. So in a lot of states where renewables are getting unleashed, states like Kansas and Iowa, there's tremendous support across both parties. Unlocking renewable energy is a totally bipartisan issue, crosses the political divide. Climate doesn't, renewable energy does. I think that's very important. And all the investments in these sectors are really growing. The market for green bonds has grown significantly from less than $1 billion in 2007 to nearly $40 billion in 2014. Clean energy investments are now at $320 billion a year. Ceres is calling for the clean trillion. That we will get there, and actually that won't be enough. We're going to need a lot more than a clean trillion, but it's good to have a goal, and let's get there. According to a recent GISIA report, investments under SRI totaled $34 trillion last year. In the U.S., there was a 76% increase in SRI investments from 2012 to 2014. And in the U.S., 18% of all investments use some kind of ESG screen. But in Europe, 58% do. We have a long way to go. So this does mean we're beginning to align capital with social needs. There's research, and I'm sure you're more familiar with it than I am, that these new strategies do outperform the market. But while we were busy screening out and making sure that we don't invest in the bad things, the divestment work, and NRDC last year created a fossil fuel-free fund with Blackstone and FTSE to allow our donors to have a strategy for fossil-free fuel investments. We need to actually look at what we're screening in. What are we unleashing? Are we building infrastructure that is resilient to climate change? Are we putting the investments in the infrastructure section? Are we unleashing enough clean energy dollars to provide affordable access to clean energy for the world? The answer, of course, is no. And that's, I think, the challenge for all of you. We don't want to be just responsible and have cleaner, greener investments. We want those investments to be substantial enough to transform society. And I think it's the transformation that is actually most exciting. Last weekend, it was mentioned, there was the Yale Environmental Sustainability Summit, which was great, very exciting. I'm sure many of you were there. There were lots of new ideas. It was very energetic. And this is actually the third conference that I've been to at Yale just in the last month. One was on climate communications, one was YES, one was you guys here today. Just shows how much attention and interest and commitment there is to these issues. In the conference last weekend, several themes emerged, which I thought were really helpful in thinking about what we need to do. First, obviously, we need leadership. We need leadership from the public and private sector. I think we're beginning to see that, and that's really, really important because I think it brings others along. We need innovation and technology, and there's a lot of innovation and technology going on. Fundamentally, we need disruption. We need disruption in the energy sector. So it's not we're building fossil fuel plants and we're going into the big grid. We need renewables, we need batteries, we need microgrids, we need all kinds of new ways to deliver, store, and ensure that we have access to energy. We also have to maximize efficiency. This is an area that NRDC has worked on for 30 years, for a long time, at least 25 of them. I was like, people do not get this. It sounds great. I know it makes sense financially, but people aren't making the investment. Actually, that really changed in 2008. When the market went down, suddenly these energy efficient investments really made sense. And they're the cheapest, fastest ways of reducing our carbon emissions. And it can be done in the design stage. There's a tremendous amount, particularly in Asia, of buildings that are yet to be built. Making sure those are built as efficiently as possible is going to be absolutely critical to solving the climate problem. The private sector cannot accomplish what we need to do without government resolve. Fundamentally, we do need policies. And this is an area where, again, NRDC has, this is the space that we live in each and every day. Renewable portfolio standards are critical. We need a clean energy standard for the country. We have clean fuel standards in California. We need to continue to identify what policies are going to actually accelerate the changes that are necessary. The President's Clean Power Plan is an immensely powerful tool. Every state in the country is going to have to come up with a strategy to reach their emission targets. That will mean it's not business as usual in the energy sector. I think this actually comes at a critically important time because the energy sector is already disrupted. The utility model is not the model that we've used in the past. So as all the utilities and the PUCs around the country are struggling to figure out what is the new strategy for energy in this country, in comes the Clean Power Plan. And so it's just adding to the disruption that's already there. It's not creating this disruption. And in some ways, I think it provides an opportunity because it gives a goal for what is the purpose, what do we have to get to, and then how do we do it, and the Clean Power Plan that are going to be developed in all these states. And I know this is going to be litigated. Every major clean air standard of the last 40 years has been litigated. But let me just say, we win each and every time. So it takes longer to get through that process, but it's a very strong statute. Tremendous amount of work has been done to determine how to make it legally viable and succeed in the objective that we have here. And I think it will prevail, and it'll be very important. The Paris COP will again be a significant signal around the world that we have to get on a clean energy strategy. And I think it will be a very positive agreement. Again, it's going to be, for some people, it's going to be glass half full. I'm confident I will be one of those people. For some people, it'll be glass half empty. But it will keep us on a strategy not to reach 2 degrees, but to get us on a trajectory where we can ratchet it up, ratchet it up, ratchet it up, and get engagement by everyone to reach that goal. And someday, we'll have a price on carbon. Everybody has a guess on when that will be. That's beginning to happen, of course, in California and in parts where we are regulating carbon. It's going to be a long time, in my view, before it happens in the United States Congress, but it will happen. And once that happens, that will be transformational. So I implore all of you to support whatever effort is out there to actually get that price on carbon, because I have a funny story, well, a story I think is kind of funny. In 2000, when I was here at Yale, on the Yale Corporation, Janet Yellen and Rick Levin, President Levin, economist, Janet Yellen, well known, talking about carbon. We're always talking about carbon. And what's the best strategy to regulate carbon? They both said to me, Francis, of course it's a price on carbon. I said, that may be, but you tell me the political strategy that's going to make that possible. It wasn't possible in the year 2000. It's not possible today, but we will get there. When these policies are in place, money will flow. The renewables revolution actually happened because of the policies that were created in Europe that really drove the transformation in the solar sector. Very, very critical. And the policies can't happen without political will. This is an important part of it. And I think the growing voice for climate action around the world is just a critical component of getting the support to put in place the policies that can actually create certainty in the financial sector to make the investments that are necessary to transform society. Everybody has a role to play. The roles are all different, but we need everybody playing their role to the maximum extent. As long as we view climate change as an environmental issue, we lose. Fundamentally, it's an issue that transforms across all sectors. And I think actually that's something that the Pope's encyclical really made very clear. If it's an environmental issue, I don't think we succeed. If it's a universal issue in society across the world and everybody is engaged in the solution, then we win. And fundamentally, that's what it is. Because if we don't come together and figure out the strategy to really solve this problem, the whole world is at risk. All the things that we know of today, the changes are going to be so transformational in the negative that it's an issue that just transcends, to me, almost every other issue that we can think of. So it is so delightful, actually, to see you all here coming together to explore ways to compete with one another. I don't know how that competition works, but I urge you all great success and hope you all win. But I just think that, that's the challenge that we have today, that all of us have to work in our own area to maximize the attention to the issue of climate change, to get the technologies, to get the investments, to get the policies, to make social change. So our future, our children's future, I have 2 brand new grandchildren, our grandchildren's future is one that is secure, that we're confident of, that we're hopeful for them. I said last week at the YES conference, I think people in this field, we just, on a daily basis, kind of go between hope and despair, because if you look at the science, you can despair. But I remain hopeful. I remain hopeful because there's so many people, so many interests engaged in solving the problem. And so I hope you will join with all of me in that hopeful strategy and an engagement, and keep that resolve that we all must have to address one of the greatest challenges that I think the planet's ever faced. Thank you so much.